Well, hello there, and I do hope you're all well. Now, yesterday, arrogant Tory MP Steve Brine was clearly fuming after the Joe Lycett debacle, where at a digital culture, media and sports committee meeting debating the work of the BBC, Conservative MP for Winchester and Chandlersford, Steve Brine, wanted to talk about impartiality. Yes, I shit you not. And then wanted to take certain issues surrounding a certain scene in EastEnders about Brexit. He then got on to about the situation with Joe Lycett, who, let's just be honest, he just held up a mirror, and then took issue with a certain Gary Lineker and his Twitter account. Absolutely hilarious.
EastEnders, one of my favourite shows. This is a bit of a get out of my pub moment. Well, Brexit was likened to COVID. After being shown chucking a glass of water into Sam Mitchell's face, Sharon Watts aggressively told her, "We've had Brexit and COVID, we don't need you here." And then Laura Koonsberg, bringing us right up to date on Sunday. So Laura, who is a fantastic journalist, and I would say fairly unimpeachable on impartiality, actually, in knowing her, watching her, and knowing her personally.
Agreed.
But I would say that her show got off to a challenging start in terms of major appeal outside of SW1 and on this whole issue of impartiality by the Joe Lycett debacle, where he was asked on as a pundit. He did this mock applause after Liz Truss left the interview chair, was then immediately asked for his reaction, and he said she was the dregs of what they've got available and the backwash of the available MPs. Now,
I think you're being slightly disingenuous there. He said most people would say that. You are just being disingenuous there. Let's be honest. He didn't say anything that was any different to what you would say. All he did was just hold up the mirror, and you didn't like what you saw. And I think probably you're a little bit gutted that it wasn't you sat there saying all this stuff.
Now, whatever your opinion, my colleagues around this table, whatever my opinion of people in my party, not really relevant. But for a brand new show, which really wants to get off to a good start, when you're booking a pundit to go on, Joe Lycett is not an uncontroversial figure. You talk about the conversations that go on after output. How about a conversation that goes on before output, where somebody says, "You know what? New show, new start, new term. Let's not book Joe, because we know what."
Is he delving in a bit of cancel culture?
Joe's going to deliver. You see, somebody who's ungenerous, the BBC could say, "You knew exactly what Joe was going to deliver, and that's why you booked him." So those examples, there's some horror stories in them. I could go on. I mean, you've got Gary Lineker. He's still tweeting that the government are voting to pour raw sewage into our waterways. You and I have talked personally in this session about Gary Lineker before. You told me that you were calling him to check for his tweets. I care what he thinks about Spurs' attempt to win the Premier League. It's going very well, I might add. Not what he thinks about water quality.
More cancel culture?
That's not why you pay him. So these individual programme content reviews, in the context of some of those examples that I've just given, what are the yardsticks against which you're judging success? Because many would take those examples I've just given and say, you've got a lot of work to do.
We've always got work to do.
Not just across news. I mean, the EastEnders is not news, is it?
I was going to say that because I think there are, if I may, very different. Each of those instances is different in themselves, by the way. Yeah. Very different. No, they're different editorially. I think that's really important
because they're across the output.
And they're interesting, but they have different. I have different views on them. So I think that we're in a news output, or we're doing a journalist is giving a view where they've assumed a position. There's a problem. By the way, we do have hundreds of thousands of hours output. I will give you that sentence. And overall, I think we are delivering well, by the way. I do think that. And I think we need to be, it's important that we're proportional about this. But there are instances where, and of course you're going to, in my job, get things where you go, well, that sentence wasn't delivered right. Yeah? I think in drama, it is a real kind of question on that. Because I think characters offering, that's not, Sharon is not the views of the BBC, by the way. We can debate that at length, but I think that, and it's important that you get drama from different perspectives, different writers, all of that. But I don't think it depends on the context of that view and how it's offered. I don't think that. I think that is a different example. With regard to Laura, I mean, Laura is exceptional. I think we can debate the merits of that particular booking. I don't think it displays BBC bias in the slightest. The audience saw it for what it was, by the way. I mean, I think to date, I just looked at it, I think yesterday, by yesterday with the front page and the headline, we had 28 complaints. I think we're up to 66 complaints. They saw what it was. It was bemusing. We can debate exactly in the way you debated about,
Why go there?
Whether it's the right booking. What I would say is Laura conducted herself as the BBC host, I thought, in exemplary fashion, in a slightly difficult situation. We move on, but it doesn't. I mean, the idea that displays bias. Now, I think there are examples within what you said where you do say, okay, and this is where it gets, in fact, for me, more interesting. So when we look at the reviews we're going to do, breakfast, country file, English language, morning radio news programmes, the real things I'm interested in, those things I think you've got to sanction or not, or take action, Lineker included, in terms of, and I think we can debate that in a minute. I don't quite think he criticised the government in that way, but I think he has to absolutely be within, and I've talked to Gary, I think he was doing thousands of tweets, and I think overall the behaviour, in terms of where he is, I think he's in a lot better state. He is not at the standard of a news and journalist. He shouldn't be a news and current affairs executive. But overall, I think that conversation goes on. I'm very supportive of Gary. I think he's a brilliant presenter. And I think it is work in progress in terms of where he draws the line. But we've had a good conversation. I think he understands the guidelines. But I'm not...
When you had that conversation, does he say, okay, yeah, let's do this then, Tim, let's go through this, let's tick this box? Or does he sort of say, yeah, I've screwed up again? I mean, we're
in other words, what he's saying is, when you tell him to stop tweeting these tweets that are criticising our party, does he say, oh yeah, I've screwed up, or whatever? This is just fascism, isn't it?
paying Gary £1.35 million. I mean, he's down 10 grand on last year, but I'm sure he'll get by when his energy bill comes in. But I mean, we're paying him 1.35 million quid, and he's a brilliant pundit on football.
He is, yeah.
And he's entertaining.
He is.
I don't care what he thinks about water quality. Why should we be paying him? My constituents are taxed through the licence fee. They don't pay it, they go to prison for somebody to give their opinion on water quality.
Well, with respect, you're not paying him to
but he's doing
tweet. And I think he is. My view is that overall, if you look in the round, I think people are smart enough to see this. Look at this sensibly. I think Gary and I have had conversation that says, and I think he's seen a massive improvement to where he was a few years ago in terms of his entry into party politics. I think that banning people completely from getting to any issues-based tweeting is probably the wrong position to do, but there's a standard there. We talk about it. I'm very supportive of him. Now, going...
Flabbergasting, innit? Wouldn't have looked out of place in North Korea, would it? I just think, how dare you, Steve Bryan, taking issue about saying in EastEnders to a point. It's just so hilarious. It is clearly obvious. You're just a rabid Brexit extremist. Now, I was listening to James O'Brien the other day, and he talked about this situation with Joe Lycett and what happened on that programme. And if I remember rightly, he had a comedian on who just pointed out that what Joe did was he just held up a mirror to those people, and they didn't like what they saw because he said nothing different to what Mark Francois, Wiggy Michael Fabricant, Mad Nad, Peter Boone, or John Redwood, and I could go right up to this bell-tap Steve Bryan. Joe Lycett spoke like one of them, an extreme right-winger, didn't he? And those people took to social media, front-page headlines, to absolutely vent their spleen about him basically mocking an unserious person who 5 minutes earlier spoke out a word salad and showed she was not somebody to take seriously at all. But he took exception to somebody who said exactly the same tosh he would have spouted if he'd have been invited on the show. But I found Gary Lineker bit very disturbing for two reasons, because he seemed to me that when he said, my constituents don't pay for him to tweet about how bad our water is, to me what he meant to say was, I don't like the fact he's exposing our failings and I'm getting it in the neck from my constituents. But the mentioning about what he earns and talking about paying his bills just shows you about... well, not worrying about paying his bills, should I say. Shows you what an arduous little turd he really is. What do you guys think? Right, I shall leave the video here until the next time. I shall bid you farewell and take care.